A child's scream pierces the summer heat like a siren cut loose. 7-year-old Emma runs through the restaurant kitchen, her small feet slapping against the stainless steel floor, her voice breaking into pure terror. The pots rattle. The flames jump. And Sofia Voss lunges forward without thinking, her body moving between the child and Douglas Hale, the restaurant manager whose shadow has been swallowing her life for 18 months. His hand is raised. His face is a knot of rage. Sofia is 28 years old but looks 40. Her dark hair, which might have been beautiful once, is pulled back so tight it stretches the skin at her temples. One eye is swollen shut from 3 days ago. Handprints bruise her throat in shades of purple and black, each fingerprint a separate word he didn't speak but showed instead. She works 14 hours a day at Marino's, a high-end Italian restaurant in downtown Seattle where the clientele wear watches that cost more than everything she owns, and where the tips that should be hers vanish into Hale's pockets like water down a drain. She has $78 in her bank account. 2 weeks until her apartment gets seized. "Do not touch her," Sofia says. Her voice comes out cracked, barely above a whisper, but it fills the kitchen. The line cooks freeze. The sous chef stops mid-motion. Even Hale hesitates for a fraction of a second, and in that hesitation, Sofia pulls Emma close to her chest, the child's small body trembling like a bird caught in a fist. Emma is not her daughter. Sofia is the live-in nanny for the Sinclair family, sleeping in a converted closet in their mansion on Capitol Hill, pouring every ounce of herself into a child whose mother barely looks at her and whose father travels for business 40 weeks a year. She works for Marino's at night and for the Sinclairs during the day. 18 hours total. No days off. One day she counted the hours on her phone and then deleted the calculation because she did not want to know if it was accurate. The foreclosure notice is in her purse. She checked it this morning at 5:36 a.m. while making Emma's school lunch. The bank will seize her small studio apartment in Ballard in 14 days. The notice was written in language designed to be impersonal, but it felt personal. It felt like a knife. Hale's jaw tightens. His shoulders square. He has made the calculation. Is it worth it to escalate? Worth the scene, the witnesses, the potential HR complaint that he can bury with a single word to Evelyn Blackwell, the restaurant's owner, who has been spreading rumors that Sofia is unstable, unfit, dangerous. The restaurant is closed at this hour. It is 4:13 in the afternoon, between lunch service and dinner prep. The kitchen is nearly empty except for the core team who know better than to speak. "Get the kid out of here," Hale says, his voice dropping into something darker, more controlled. Controlled is worse than rage. Rage can be defended against. Controlled is calculation. "She's got no business being in my kitchen. She came looking for me," Sofia says. She keeps her hand on Emma's head, the child's hair soft beneath her palm. "I am taking her upstairs. Right now." She does not wait for permission. She does not ask. She simply moves, guiding Emma toward the service stairs that lead to the storage room and then to the back exit. Her legs feel like they might collapse, but they do not. The body sometimes carries what the mind cannot bear. Behind her, she hears Hale's breathing. She hears him tell the line cooks to get back to work. She hears the kitchen resume its rhythm, trying to erase what just happened. But something has shifted. Something small and dangerous and irreversible. 3 blocks away, in the mahogany and leather quiet of a private dining room at the back of Marino's, Giovanni Valenti sits at a table that only he sits at. The table is set for one, though he never eats alone. Tonight, Vinny and Luca sit across from him, their suits costing more than Sofia earns in a month, their watches gleaming in the candlelight. Giovanni is 42 years old. He is 6'2". His shoulders are broad beneath a cream-colored shirt that costs more than Sofia's monthly rent, unbuttoned at the collar to reveal a chest scarred from a knife wound taken when he was 19. His hair is dark, combed back from his forehead, silvered at the temples in a way that makes him look both brutal and refined. His eyes are storm gray and they miss nothing. He is the most dangerous man in 3 counties, and the waitstaff moves around him like ghosts. Vinny is speaking about territory, about a shipment coming up from Portland, about complications with a rival operation. Giovanni listens with his hands on the table, his gold rings catching the light. He wears a watch on his left wrist that costs what Sofia's apartment will be worth when they foreclose on it. He does not look at Vinny while listening. He looks at the kitchen door. He has been a regular at Marino's for 7 years. In that time, he has developed a particular rhythm, a particular routine. He comes on Tuesday and Thursday nights. He sits at this table. He orders the osso buco and a single glass of Barolo. He conducts business in low tones while the restaurant churns around him. But something is different tonight. The service is slower. There is a tremor in the air. The manager, a man named Douglas Hale, keeps disappearing into the back. Something is wrong, Giovanni says. He does not raise his voice. Vinny and Luca exchange a glance. Giovanni rarely states the obvious, and when he does, it means he has already identified the problem and is deciding what to do about it. Want me to check? Vinny asks. No, Giovanni says. He sets down his glass. The candlelight flickers across his face, and for just a moment, something surfaces in his expression, something cold and questioning. Just watch. Watch and listen. In the kitchen, Sofia steadies Emma in the storage room, promising her it is safe here, that nothing bad happens in rooms full of boxes and cans and proper lighting. She opens a container of the good pasta, the fresh linguine that the head chef receives twice a week from a supplier in North Beach, and she lets Emma watch while she scoops it into a bowl with a little butter and parmesan. The bad man is angry, Emma says. She is 7 years old. She has already learned the tone of voice that means someone is about to hurt someone else. The bad man is always angry, Sofia says. She does not lie to children. But I will not let him hurt you. Do you understand me? Emma nods. She eats the pasta slowly, watching Sofia's face. Sofia thinks about the foreclosure notice. She thinks about the apartment she has saved for 5 years to afford, the small place in Ballard that was supposed to be hers, really hers, somewhere safe. The mortgage is not even paid off. The bank has decided she is not sufficient collateral for herself anymore. Will you leave like Daddy leaves? Emma asks. Sofia's throat tightens. She kneels down so she is at Emma's eye level. No, she says. I will not leave you. She means it. She will sleep in her car before she leaves Emma. She will figure out how to keep the child safe. What she does not know, what no one knows yet, is that in approximately 43 minutes, a summer thunderstorm will arrive. It will come without warning, the sky turning the color of concrete, the rain falling so hard you cannot see across the street. It will catch her on the highway with a car that has been dying for weeks, finally giving up completely. It will leave her stranded on the shoulder of I-5 with $78 in her pocket and a crumpled foreclosure notice getting soaked in the downpour. And she does not know that on that dark, rain-soaked stretch of highway, a black convoy will appear through the storm. That the first SUV will slow. That the rear window will lower to reveal storm-grey eyes watching her with an intensity that will change everything. But that is still 43 minutes away. For now, she finishes feeding Emma. For now, she holds the child in the storage room while the restaurant's machinery grinds on around them, oblivious to the fact that something is about to break. Back in the private dining room, Giovanni's phone vibrates against the table. He glances at it once, then slides it back into his jacket. Vinny notices that his jaw has tightened. Luca notices that his hand, previously relaxed on the table, has closed into a fist. The Sinclair job, Vinny says carefully, reading the room. Is that the problem? No, Giovanni says. His voice comes out low, almost to himself. The problem is not the job. The problem is that he saw her. 3 weeks ago, when she brought the Sinclair girl into the restaurant for her mother's birthday dinner, he saw Sofia Voss for the first time. She was wearing a simple black dress, the kind of uniform a nanny wears to be invisible. Her dark hair was pulled back. One of her eyes was not yet bruised, but the other one held something he recognized. He had seen it in mirrors, in the eyes of people who have learned that the world is not safe. He has trained himself not to notice things like that. He has built an empire by noticing things and then choosing not to care. But something about her caught him. Something about the way she held that child, the way she stood slightly in front of her, as if making herself a shield. His father used to come home angry. His father used to raise his hand. His mother used to pull him close and pretend the hand was not coming. Giovanni swore, when he was old enough to make the vow stick, that no child would ever have to hide behind a woman who was afraid. He does not know why he keeps coming back to Marino's. He tells himself it is the osso buco, which is excellent. He tells himself it is the private room, which is convenient for business. He does not tell himself that he is waiting to see if she will appear again, or that he has memorized the angles of her face, or that he heard, through the restaurant's casual networks, that her name is Sofia Voss and that she works 18-hour days and sleeps in a closet in a house that does not belong to her. The rain starts suddenly outside the restaurant's front windows. One moment the evening is warm and humid. The next moment the sky opens and the water falls so hard you can hear it hammering against the glass. Giovanni stands. He does this without explanation. He walks toward the kitchen. Vinny and Luca remain seated, exchanging a look. In 15 years of working for him, they have learned that when Giovanni moves without announcement, the world is about to reorganize itself. The kitchen door swings open. The heat and noise pour out. And Giovanni Valenti walks into the space where Sofia Voss is standing with a child in her arms, and their eyes meet for the second time, and neither of them knows yet that everything is about to change. Before we continue, if this story is hitting you in the heart already, drop a like. Share it with someone you love. Subscribe right now so you don't miss what happens next. This is only the beginning of what Sofia has no idea is about to unfold. Now, let us go back. Let us understand how a woman with $78 and a crumpled piece of paper ended up in this moment at all. 17 hours earlier, Sofia Voss stood in the cramped bathroom of the Blackwell mansion with her fingertips pressed against her temples, counting. Not sheep. Money. The mental arithmetic was automatic now, practiced, worn smooth by repetition. $17 in her wallet. $43 hidden in the coffee tin in her bedroom, the converted closet on the third floor that Evelyn Blackwell called staff quarters but which was really just a room barely wide enough to turn around in. $60 total to last 4 days until the restaurant paid her, and that was if Douglas Hale didn't dock her again for being 2 minutes late yesterday, which he would, because he was Douglas Hale and that was what he did. The foreclosure notice was folded in her back pocket, the paper soft from being handled, refolded, read again as if the words might rearrange themselves into something survivable. $22,000. Not quite. 22,000 and change. The number didn't matter. What mattered was that she had 2 weeks to find it, or the house her mother had left her would be gone. Sold to cover medical debt her mother had accrued in her final months. Sofia had been working to pay down that debt for 3 years and had managed to move the needle just barely, like pushing a boulder with her thumb. She pressed a cold washcloth against her eyes. They felt sandpapered. She had worked a double shift yesterday at Marino's, the upscale Italian restaurant where the waitresses wore black dresses that had to be pressed within an inch of their lives and where tips came slowly because most of the clientele moved money around in ways that never touched a wallet. She had come home at 11 in the evening, helped Emma, the Blackwell 7-year-old, with her reading homework, and been back at the mansion by dawn to prepare breakfast for a family that barely acknowledged her presence. This was her life. The mathematics of survival. Sofia opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The morning light poured through the windows in a way that made the floors gleam. Everything in this house gleamed. Everything cost more than she earned in 6 months. The paintings alone, the ones Evelyn pointed out to her dinner guests with that particular tone of voice that meant * look how cultivated I am *, probably cost more than the down payment on her mother's house. She found Emma in the kitchen, already dressed for school, sitting at the enormous island with cereal in front of her and a drawing in her lap. "Good morning," Sweet girl, Sofia said, and Emma looked up, her face breaking into a smile that made Sofia's chest hurt. This was the part of the job that mattered. Not the cleaning or the cooking or the 14-hour days. Emma. Vivi, I made you colors, Emma said, holding up the drawing. It was a mess of crayon, blues and greens and purples layered over each other in what might have been a landscape or might have been abstract. The child's interpretation of art was gloriously unconcerned with accuracy. Colors for what, Emma more? Sofia sat down beside her, pulling the drawing close. Colors for sad days, Emma said with the seriousness of a small philosopher. When you feel sad, look at this. Sofia looked at her. Really looked at her. Emma was 7 years old and had already noticed that Sofia cried sometimes, that the weight of the world pressed down on her in ways that showed in her face no matter how hard she tried to hide it. This is beautiful, Sofia whispered, and she meant it. She folded the drawing carefully and tucked it into the front pocket of her apron, where it would stay all day, pressed against her heart. The morning continued in its narrow groove. Breakfast, clean-up, getting Emma ready for school, driving her to the private academy 5 blocks away where tuition costs more per year than Sofia made. The drive took 12 minutes. The parking lot cost $4. She watched Emma run up the concrete steps toward the door, the child's backpack bobbing, and Sofia felt the familiar ache that came with loving someone else's child. At noon, she was back at Marino's, tying on her apron in the narrow staff room that smelled like bleach and old grease. The apron was stained from yesterday, coffee at the hem, what might have been red wine at the waist. The laundry service that was supposed to come twice weekly had somehow stopped coming after Evelyn had an argument with the owner about a misplaced Hermes scarf. Sofia had been wearing the same 3 aprons for 2 months now, hand-washing them at night in the closet bathroom. Douglas Hale was in the kitchen, and he looked at her the way he always did, with the particular intensity of a man who believed that your desperation was an invitation. He was 56 years old, with the kind of soft thickness that came from expensive lunches and expensive wine. His shirt was linen, expensive. His shoes were Italian leather, expensive. He had worked his way up from nothing to become the manager of the city's most exclusive restaurants, and somewhere in that climb, he had decided that any woman who worked for him was currency. "You're late," he said, though she wasn't. The clock behind his head showed 11:58. "I'm right on time, Mr. Hale." "You're always right on time, but somehow the work is always late. That's the problem with people like you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a register that was supposed to sound intimate but sounded like a threat. "You don't understand that being here is a privilege. You could be grateful." Sofia kept her hand steady, kept her voice level. "I'll start on the prep." But as she moved past him toward the kitchen, his hand caught her wrist. His fingers were warm, which somehow made it worse. "Emma Valenti comes in tonight," he said, and Sofia's blood went cold at the name. Everyone at Marino's whispered about Giovanni Valenti. Mafia. That was the word that hung in the air whenever he was mentioned, though no one said it aloud. Powerful. Connected. Dangerous in ways that were understood without explanation. He sits at table 12. I'll be the one greeting him. You don't approach that table. You don't serve that table. You don't exist if he's in this restaurant. Do you understand me? I understand, Sofia said, and he released her wrist. She went to the walk-in freezer to collect ingredients, and in the cold air, she checked the inside of her wrist. No visible marks. Not yet. That was Douglas's skill. He hurt you in ways that didn't show, or that only showed if you knew where to look. By 6 o'clock, the restaurant was packed. The dinner crowd came early on Thursdays, something about an early performance at the theater. Sofia worked the front of the house, taking orders, delivering plates, clearing glasses. Her feet ached in ways that had become a permanent condition, a baseline state. She had learned to ignore it. At 7:13 in the evening, the door opened and the room shifted. That was the only way to describe it. The temperature changed, the air pressure altered, and every person in Marino's became suddenly aware of the presence of someone important. Sofia was clearing a table near the bar when she felt it. She looked up and saw them, 3 men in suits that cost more than her car, and in the center, the man she had seen here weeks before, the one she had been pretending not to notice. Giovanni Valenti. He was taller than she remembered. Broader. His suit was charcoal, tailored so precisely that it looked like it had been poured onto his body. He had dark hair, graying at the temples, and a scar that ran from his left eye to his cheekbone in a thin white line. But it was his eyes that stopped her, storm grey, looking at something beyond the room, as if he could see through walls. Douglas appeared immediately, practically bowing. "Mr. Valenti, your table is ready. We have the osso buco fresh tonight, prepared exactly as you prefer it." Giovanni nodded once and moved toward the private booth at the back. His men, the 2 she had heard called Vinny and Luca, positioned themselves strategically, one at the booth's entrance, one at a small table nearby. Sofia turned back to her clearing, but her hands were trembling slightly. She didn't know why. She had seen powerful men before. This was Seattle. Powerful men were currency here, as common as rain. But she also didn't know that Douglas was watching her. Didn't know that his eyes had tracked her gaze to the man in the charcoal suit. Didn't know that a plan was already forming in his mind, something small and cruel that would become the hinge point of everything. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, another storm was gathering. Not the weather kind, not yet. The kind that moved through a city in the form of paperwork, of phone calls, of small betrayals compounding into catastrophe. Giovanni Valenti owned the city in ways most people would never understand. Not the land that belonged to mayors and developers and the tired machinery of municipal government. He owned something deeper. He owned the fear that ran underneath the streets like an underground river, the kind of fear that made people move quickly when his black SUVs passed, the kind that made shop owners sweep their storefronts a little faster when one of his men appeared at their door. But Giovanni did not feel like he owned anything. He sat in the back of the restaurant, in the private booth where the candlelight was always exactly right, and he felt like a man counting the cost of everything he had taken to survive. He was 47 years old. His suit cost more than Sofia's annual salary. His watch, a gold Rolex, face-scarred from 15 years of living a certain kind of life, sat heavy on his wrist like a reminder of time and what it had taken from him. The scar on his face, from eye to cheekbone, was pale in the warm restaurant light. He had gotten it the night his father died. Not from his father. From the man who killed his father. Giovanni had been 16. His men, Vinny and Luca, sat at nearby stations. They had been with him for a decade and a half. They knew what he liked to eat, how he took his coffee, when to speak and when to exist like shadows. They did not know much else about him. Giovanni did not believe in knowing much else about the people who worked for you. What they did know was this: he had built something unprecedented in the Seattle underworld. Not through brutality alone, though he was certainly capable of that, but through a code that made sense to the kind of men who needed codes to survive. He protected those who could not protect themselves. When a rival gang tried to move into the community center that served kids from broken homes, Giovanni's men had appeared one night and the rival gang never tried again. When a landlord in the South End threatened to evict a woman with 3 children, Giovanni bought the building. When a predator moved into a neighborhood, he did not last long. This was not charity. It was something older and harder than charity. It was a wound he carried, an oath he had made to a ghost. He had been a child in a basement apartment in Brooklyn. His father had been the kind of man whose fists came before his words, whose rage was a living thing that ate through the walls. Giovanni's mother had endured it for 8 years. Then one night, she had endured it no longer. She had left, and Giovanni never saw her again. His father had taken Giovanni's absence of a mother and translated it into blame. Giovanni carried that blame like a stone in his chest. At 16, a man named Constantine Russo had come to the apartment. He had a gun. He had killed Giovanni's father. Giovanni never knew exactly why, and he had never asked. But he knew this: Constantine had paid for Giovanni's schooling after that. had protected him, had taught him how to turn rage into strategy, fear into power. And when Constantine died, shot in a warehouse deal gone wrong, Giovanni had inherited not just Constantine's operation but his unfinished business. That business was simple: no child would suffer like Giovanni had suffered. That was the code. The osso buco arrived. Douglas, the restaurant manager, placed it in front of him with the kind of reverence reserved for religious ceremonies. Giovanni did not acknowledge him. Douglas retreated. Giovanni did not know that at that very moment, 3 blocks away, a foreclosure notice sat on a kitchen table in a converted closet. He did not know that a woman named Sofia Voss was staring at the number $35000 and counting the days she had left. 14 days. 2 weeks. The mathematics of despair. Meanwhile, in the restaurant's back office, Douglas Hale sat at a desk and opened his laptop. He was 53 years old, with thinning hair dyed an unconvincing shade of brown and the soft body of a man who had spent his life taking what he wanted from people smaller than him. He had stolen from Sofia's tips for 3 years. He had forced her to stay late without pay. He had cornered her in the walk-in freezer 2 nights ago, and when she said no, she kept saying no. He had shown her what no meant when you were nobody. Now, watching the security footage on his computer, watching Giovanni Valenti sit in that booth, watching Sofia clear tables nearby, something occurred to Douglas. Something small and vicious and perfectly cruel. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he had memorized long ago. Evelyn Blackwell answered on the second ring. She was the restaurant's owner, 61 years old, with silver hair cut into a sharp bob and eyes that had learned to enjoy other people's ruin. She was married to a judge. She sat on 3 charitable boards. She had never done anything illegal, which meant she had never done anything that would leave a trace. "It's me," Douglas said. "I have an idea." At 7:13 in the evening, a summer thunderstorm began to form over the Puget Sound. Sofia finished her shift at 11:26 p.m. She had made $42 in tips. Her foreclosure notice required $35,000. The mathematics did not improve, no matter how many times she calculated it. She walked to her car, a 2008 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been on for 6 months, and pulled onto the highway toward the cramped converted closet she called home. That cramped space where Emma, the 7-year-old she loved with a ferocity that terrified her, slept on a narrow bed and dreamed of things Sofia could not give her. The rain started somewhere near the SeaTac airport exit. Not gradually. All at once. It felt like the sky had broken open, like the clouds had decided that holding water was no longer worth the effort. Sofia turned on her wipers. The check engine light pulsed red, hypnotic, accusatory. She made it 3 more miles before the engine died. She pulled to the shoulder, put the car in neutral, and sat there. The rain hammered the roof. She had $78 in her purse. $78, and a foreclosure notice, and a bruise on her throat the shape of a man's hand. She was still sitting there when the convoy found her. 3 black SUVs, moving in formation through the downpour like sharks through dark water. They slowed as they approached her car. She watched in the mirror as the middle vehicle pulled behind her, as doors opened, as men emerged into the storm. A man in a charcoal coat approached her window. She recognized him. Giovanni Valenti. The man from the restaurant. Up close, the scar on his face was more pronounced, a thin white line like a lightning strike frozen in his skin. He tapped on her window. She rolled it down. Rain spattered across her face. "Your car is broken," he said. Not a question. "Yes." Her voice came out fractured, barely audible over the storm. "We can fix it." "I can't afford." "You were not asked what you could afford." He opened her door. His men appeared on either side of her car. One of them, the one called Luca, stood in the rain without flinching, as if weather was something that happened to other people. Giovanni extended his hand. Sofia looked at it. She looked at his face. She recognized something in his eyes that she had not expected to find: recognition. Not of her specifically. Of suffering. Of the particular exhaustion that came from carrying more than you were built to carry. She took his hand. The interior of the SUV was warm. The leather seats were the color of cream. Sofia sat shivering, rain dripping from her hair onto upholstery that probably cost more than everything she owned combined. Giovanni sat across from her. His coat was cashmere. She could smell expensive cologne and something underneath it, smoke, and the faint metallic scent of rain. "Your name," he said. "Sofia." "Sofia." He said it like he was testing the shape of it in his mouth. "You work at the restaurant?" "Yes." "As a nanny, in the evenings you work at the restaurant. During the day you care for a child." She did not ask how he knew this. Men like him knew things. That was how men like him became men like him. "Her name is Emma," Sofia said. "She's 7. She lived with her parents and I live in the same house." She could not say closet. She could not say the word out loud to a man who rode in SUVs with heated leather seats. Giovanni leaned forward slightly. "And why would you do such a thing?" "Because she needs someone. Her parents work all the time, and she needs someone." "You love her?" "Yes." The word sat between them like a confession. Giovanni pulled a phone from his jacket. He made a call without dialing, which suggested the phone was already connected, already waiting. "I need you to find out everything," he said to whoever answered. "A woman named Sofia Voss. Nanny for the Castellano family. Work history, financial situation, everything. And I need you to find out why the restaurant manager, Douglas Hale, has been stealing from her tips for 3 years. And I need you to find out what Evelyn Blackwell knows about it." He paused. "Do not ask why. Just do it." He hung up. "Where will you go tonight?" he asked Sofia. "Home. To the house. The house where you sleep in a closet." She flinched at the confirmation. At the casualness of it. As if he had simply reached into her chest and pulled out the most shameful truth she carried. "I have nowhere else," she whispered. "You do now." He gave an address to Luca, who was driving. The SUV pulled back onto the highway, away from her broken-down car, away from the rain-slicked shoulder where she had been stranded moments before. Sofia did not know that Giovanni had just set something in motion. She did not know that his men who had spent 15 years watching him move through the world with a kind of careful distance, had never seen him stop for anyone. Never seen him make calls like that. Never seen him lean forward with the kind of gentleness that suggested something fundamental had shifted. Luca glanced at Vinny in the rearview mirror. Vinny's eyes were wide. In all their years, neither of them had seen Giovanni like this. Neither of them knew that Giovanni was thinking of his father's basement apartment. Of a child waiting in the dark for someone to come home. Of a mother who never returned. Neither of them knew that sometimes the universe sends you a person who reminds you exactly why you made the oaths you made. The storm raged on outside the moving vehicle, lightning cracking across the sky in white, violent light. The rain hammered against the windows of the penthouse on the 42nd floor, and Sofia Voss stood alone in the darkness, watching the lightning split the Seattle sky into fragments of white and shadow. She wore a simple black dress. Her hair fell straight down her back. Her hands were steady now, no longer the trembling hands of a woman who counted pennies in parking lots. 1 year had passed since the night on the highway. 1 year since she had been bleeding in the rain with $78 and a foreclosure notice that told her she had 14 days to find $35,000 or lose everything she did not own. But that night, before the rescue, before the rain stopped, there had been hours of something else entirely. Hours of being trapped. The lowest point had come at 2:13 in the morning, in the basement of the restaurant where she had worked for 3 years. Douglas Hale had cornered her there after her shift ended, after the kitchen staff had gone home, after Emma, 7-year-old Emma, the girl Sofia had raised since she was born, had been put to bed upstairs in the family's home by a babysitter Sofia could not afford but could not refuse to hire. The basement was cold. It smelled like old grease and vinegar and the particular dampness of a place where nothing ever dried. Hale stood between her and the stairs, his frame blocking the light from above. He was 53 years old, with the bloated face of a man who drank red wine every night and never exercised, who wore cologne to cover the smell of sweat. His restaurant manager's suit was wrinkled at the collar. "You think you're too good for this?" His voice came out thick, slurred. 3 years you've worked here. 3 years I've been patient with you. And you walk away from me. Sofia's back pressed against the metal shelving that held supplies, boxes of napkins, industrial-sized cans of tomato paste, bottles of olive oil worth more than her weekly salary. "I told you no," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "I told you no, and I meant it. You don't get to tell me no." He moved toward her. "Do you understand? You don't have the position to tell anyone no." What happened next took 4 minutes and 17 seconds. He grabbed her throat with both hands. His fingers dug into her windpipe with the casual violence of a man who had learned he could do anything because there was no one to stop him. Sofia tried to scream, but the sound came out crushed, strangled, useless. She kicked at him. She clawed at his wrists. She felt something give way in her throat, a cartilage, a tendon, something essential snapping like kindling. His face came close to hers. His breath smelled like whiskey and garlic. "You're going to smile and you're going to let me touch you, and you're never going to say no to me again, because if you do, I'm going to make sure you never work in this city again. I'm going to tell everyone you stole from the register. I'm going to tell them you touched the customers inappropriately. I'm going to destroy you so completely that your own family won't recognize your name." When he finally released her, Sofia collapsed onto the concrete floor. Her eye had already begun to swell. She could feel the handprint bruises forming on her throat like brands, marking her as his property. He straightened his suit. He checked his reflection in a darkened window. He walked up the stairs without looking back. Sofia lay on that cold concrete for 8 minutes before she could move. That same night, at 11:51 p.m., as she was driving home in her car, a 2008 Honda Civic with 187,000 miles on the odometer, the engine died on Interstate 90. The summer heat had broken. The sky had turned the color of a bruise. The first drops of rain came, then the downpour came, and Sofia sat in the driver's seat with her one good eye pressed against the steering wheel, and she thought about the foreclosure notice. The bank had given her 14 days. $35,000. She had $78 in her wallet. She had no family. She had no friends who could loan her that kind of money. She had only herself, and she was not enough. She would never be enough. And Emma, sweet Emma, who called her mommy even though Sofia was not her mother, would have no place to sleep. Would have no one to wake her up in the morning. Would be swallowed by the system, passed from foster home to foster home, until she forgot that someone had once loved her completely. Sofia opened the car door. The rain was cold, far colder than it should have been in the Seattle summer. It cut through her thin waitress uniform. It ran down her face in rivers, mixing with her tears, and she thought about that moment in the basement. She thought about how Hale had looked at her, not with desire, but with the pure certainty of someone who knew she was powerless. She thought about walking into the rain and just not stopping. She thought about how simple that would be. The headlights appeared then, red and distant, growing closer. Not one car. Multiple vehicles. A convoy of black SUVs moving down the highway in perfect formation, their lights cutting through the rain like knives through silk. The lead vehicle slowed. The window came down. Giovanni Valenti sat in the back seat, and the first thing Sofia saw was his eyes. Dark gray, the color of storm clouds. The second thing she saw was the scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone, a thin white line that had been there since he was 16 years old. The third thing she saw was his hand, which he extended toward her with the kind of gentleness that seemed impossible in a man built the way he was built. "Get in," he said. His voice was low, unhurried. "You are not meant to die on this highway." What happened in the next 72 hours changed everything. Giovanni made calls from the penthouse. His investigators found the foreclosure notice, found the eviction date, found the exact number needed to save her. They found Douglas Hale's private phone records, 3 years of threatening messages to women, photos of his stolen tips meticulously catalogued in a spreadsheet, an email to Evelyn Blackwell asking her to help him discredit Sofia before she went to the authorities. Evelyn Blackwell was 58 years old, with silver hair and the kind of wealth that came from a grandfather's shipping fortune. She owned the restaurant. She had known about the stolen tips. She had known about the harassment. She had helped Hale plan how to destroy Sofia's reputation so thoroughly that no one would ever believe her story. Giovanni learned all of this by 4:39 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. By 6:15 a.m., 12 men dressed in black moved through the Seattle streets like water finding cracks. They moved to the warehouse where Hale kept his secondary office. They moved to the hotel where Evelyn Blackwell was staying for a business conference. They moved with the kind of precision that comes from a lifetime of understanding how to dismantle things without warning. The FBI raid came at dawn, as if orchestrated by Giovanni himself, which it had been, though the agents did not yet understand this. Douglas Hale was arrested at his apartment while he was still in bed. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists at 6:56 a.m. The federal agents read him his charges: wire fraud, theft, sexual assault, witness intimidation, threatening communications with intent to extort. His face went white. "I don't understand," he kept saying. "I don't understand. How did they, who told?" But he understood. Everyone understands, in the end, when the machinery of consequences begins to turn. The footage was everywhere by noon. News helicopters captured him being led from his apartment, his hands cuffed behind his back, his face a map of disbelief. Within 3 hours, 847,000 people had watched the video. By evening, 2 million. By the next morning, every local news station was running the story. The restaurant he managed was shutting down immediately. Customers were canceling reservations. The owner was issuing statements of shock and betrayal. But it was not Hale who would face the longest consequences. The federal investigation into his crimes revealed the full scope of his partnership with Evelyn Blackwell. Phone records. Bank transfers. A pattern of abuse and cover-ups that stretched back 8 years and involved 17 other women. When prosecutors realized the scope of what she had enabled, they brought additional charges: conspiracy, racketeering, and trafficking in human misery. Evelyn Blackwell's arrest came on a Wednesday afternoon, in the lobby of her hotel, in front of 300 conference attendees. The handcuffs caught the light. Her face crumpled. She tried to maintain her composure, but the weight of what was happening, the absolute, irreversible collapse of her world, broke her composure into fragments. "This is a mistake," she kept saying, her voice climbing higher with each repetition. "This is a mistake. Do you understand who I am?" She was no one now. She was a woman in handcuffs, led out by federal agents, her face broadcast on every screen in the city. The sentences came 68 days later. Douglas Hale, 40 years in federal prison, restitution to his victims, permanent registry as a sexual offender. Evelyn Blackwell, 32 years, restitution, permanent loss of her business licenses and securities clearance. Neither of them would ever work again. Neither of them would ever hold power again. Neither of them would ever hurt anyone again. But that had not been enough for Giovanni. On the night of Hale's arrest, he had also transferred the full amount of Sofia's foreclosure debt, $35,000, directly to the bank. The notice was rescinded. The house was saved. By sunrise, Sofia owned her home. She did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, watching the rain slow and then stop, watching the sky begin to lighten, and she understood that something fundamental had shifted in the architecture of her life. The man who had saved her had disappeared. He had not said goodbye. He had not explained. He had simply handed her an address on a piece of paper, told her she was safe, and vanished back into the machinery of his empire. For the next year, Sofia had rebuilt herself. She had used her newfound stability to complete her high school diploma. She had taken a job as an office manager at a legitimate business, not because she needed the money, but because she needed the dignity of work chosen rather than forced upon her. She had created a scholarship fund for young women in her situation, named it after her mother, funded it entirely with her own earnings. She had become someone new. And now, standing at this penthouse window on the 42nd floor, watching the rain and the lightning and the vast sprawl of Seattle glittering in the darkness below, she heard the elevator doors open behind her. His footsteps were slow, measured, the same footsteps she had heard on the highway that night. "I wanted to come before," Giovanni said. His voice carried the weight of a year's worth of waiting. "I wanted to come every day. But you needed to become who you are without me standing in your shadow." Sofia turned to face him. He was exactly as she remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, built like a man who had fought his way through the world. His suit was charcoal gray. His white shirt was open at the collar. The scar on his face caught the lightning when it flashed. "Why are you here now?" she asked. "Because a year ago, I made an oath that if you survived this, I would spend the rest of my life ensuring you never felt powerless again." He moved toward her slowly, as if afraid she might disappear. "Because I have spent every single day thinking about the moment you looked at me in the rain and saw something in my eyes that told you it was safe to trust me. Because I have liquidated 60% of my operations and legitimized the rest, and none of it matters to me anymore if you are not there to witness what I have become. And because I love you, Sofia. I have loved you since that night on the highway, and I will love you for the rest of my life." He got down on one knee. The ring he produced was simple, a single diamond, but the diamond was enormous, and it caught the lightning and threw it back in white fire. "Marry me," he said. "Not because I saved you. Not because I have money or power. But because you are the woman who chose to live, who chose to rebuild, who chose to become more than what was done to her. Marry me because I want to spend my life watching you shine." Sofia took his hand. The rain continued to fall outside the window, drumming against the glass, and somewhere in the city below, Emma was sleeping in her own bed in the house that Sofia owned, safe and loved and forever certain that she would never be abandoned. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. Sofia stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the penthouse, 34 stories above Seattle, watching the city lights scatter across the darkness like scattered prayers. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman she barely recognized, shoulders back, hair long and healthy, wearing a cream silk blouse that cost more than she used to make in a month. The foreclosure notice was gone. The closet was gone. The 14-hour days were gone. 1 year had passed since the night on the highway. 1 year since the rain stopped falling and Giovanni Valenti disappeared from her life as completely as he had arrived, leaving only silence and a phone number she never called. The penthouse door opened behind her. She did not turn around. "You left the light on in Emma's room," a voice said. Deep. Measured. Exactly as she remembered it. Sofia's breath caught in her throat. The city lights blurred. Giovanni walked across the living room in a charcoal suit, his cashmere coat draped over one arm. The scar on his face was the same. His eyes were the same, dark, penetrating, carrying the weight of 1,000 decisions made in darkness. But something else lived there now. Something softer. Something that looked like peace. "She was asking for you," he continued, setting the coat on the back of the sofa. "She could not sleep. So I did what you taught me to do." He moved to the window and stood beside Sofia. Not touching. Just standing there, close enough that she could hear him breathing, close enough that the warmth of him reached across the space between them. "I read her the book," he said. "The one about the girl and the garden. 3 times. On the 3rd time, she fell asleep with her hand on my arm." Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "You read it with the voices?" "The funny one for the rabbit." I attempted the rabbit voice. She told me I sounded like a dying cat. A pause. But she smiled. And then she asked me something. Sofia turned to face him. What did she ask? She asked if I was staying this time. If I was going to be here for breakfast. His jaw tightened. She asked if you were ever coming home. The tears spilled over now, running down Sofia's face without sound. 1 year of rebuilding. 1 year of building the House of Hope, a shelter for women trapped in situations like hers had been. 1 year of standing tall in boardrooms, of making decisions, of becoming someone. And it meant nothing without the two people who mattered most. I told her yes, Giovanni said quietly. I told her I was staying. I told her you were coming home because home is where we are. He turned fully toward her now. The scar caught the city light. And then she asked me the question I have been terrified to ask you myself. He reached into his jacket. His hand emerged holding something small. A ring box. Leather. Worn. As if he had carried it for a very long time. She said, "Are you going to marry her?" "Because I want to call her Mama, but I do not want to call her Mama if you are going to leave again." His voice fractured on the last word. Emma does not cry easily, Sofia. You know this. But when she asked that question, her lip trembled. And I realized that this is what I have been running from my entire life. Not violence. Not betrayal. Vulnerability. The terrifying, impossible beauty of being needed by someone who loves you. Sofia could not speak. The words were there, but they lived somewhere behind her ribs, too large and too heavy to move. Giovanni opened the box. The ring inside was simple, a single diamond, enormous, catching the city lights and throwing them back as fire. "I do not ask you to forgive me for staying away," he said. "I do not ask you to understand the code that kept me from you, the belief that loving you meant protecting you by remaining separate. I was wrong. The code was wrong. Nothing about this was right except you. You have always been right." He sank to one knee. His men, Vinny and Luca and the others, were not here to witness it. This moment belonged only to Sofia and to him and to the city and to the rain that had started falling again, drumming softly against the glass. "Marry me," Giovanni said. "Not because I saved you. You saved yourself. You took $78 and rebuilt an entire life from rubble. I watched you do it. Every single day, I watched you do it. Marry me because I have spent a year becoming the man who deserves to stand beside that woman. Marry me because I want to hear Emma call you Mama every single morning for the rest of my life. Marry me because I love you so completely that it terrifies me, and I am done being terrified of the things that matter." Sofia pulled him to his feet and kissed him. The rain continued falling. In the other room, Emma slept with her hand still on the impression of his arm, dreaming of gardens and rabbits with silly voices and a mama who came home and a man who finally stayed. 3 weeks later, Sofia stood in a garden ceremony on a terrace overlooking the Puget Sound. 200 people watched as Giovanni Valenti, the most feared man in the Pacific Northwest, took her hand with trembling fingers. The suit he wore had been tailored to perfection, but what mattered more was the way his eyes never left hers, steady and present and real. Emma walked down the aisle in a white dress, dropping rose petals with the seriousness of someone performing the most important task in the world. When she reached the altar, she did not stand with the other children. She stood between Sofia and Giovanni, holding both their hands. "You may now pronounce them husband and wife," the officiant said. "And family." The word hung in the air like a benediction. When Giovanni kissed Sofia, the crowd erupted into applause, but he barely heard it. All he heard was Emma's small voice saying, "You are staying. You are both staying. Forever and ever." Meanwhile, in a federal prison 300 miles away, Douglas Hale sat in a cell, serving the first day of a 40-year sentence. The trial had lasted 6 weeks. The evidence had been overwhelming. The viral footage of his arrest had been viewed by 17 million people. His name was synonymous with predator. His face appeared on every news channel, not as a successful restaurant manager but as a cautionary tale of what happens when power is used to prey on the powerless. Evelyn Blackwell, the wealthy restaurant owner who had covered for him, who had spread lies about Sofia's stability and her danger, had lost everything. Her business was seized. Her social standing was ash. She spent her days now in a small apartment, unable to find work, unable to leave her house without being recognized, without being spit upon, without hearing the word monster whispered in her wake. Justice, Giovanni had learned, was not quick or violent or final. Justice was watching the people who destroyed others have to live with the consequences of those choices. Justice was letting them live long enough to understand what they had done. Sofia Valenti stood at the window of her office at the House of Hope, looking at the line of women waiting for intake appointments. 23 women today. 23 women like she had been, trapped, desperate, invisible. Her non-profit had helped 400 women transition out of abusive situations in the past year. The foundation bearing her name had distributed $500,000 in emergency assistance. She had gone back to school, finishing her degree in social work. She was building something real. The door opened. Giovanni stepped in, holding a sonogram image. His eyes were bright. "The doctor confirmed it," he said. 8 weeks. Everything is healthy. Everything is perfect. Sofia took the image from his hands. A small shadow. A heartbeat. Their child. Their daughter, he had already decided, though they had only known for 5 minutes. She looked at the man standing in front of her, the most powerful man in the city, now transformed into something else entirely. A father figure to Emma. A husband. A man who had spent the last year learning to be gentle, learning to be present, learning to be human instead of a machine built for survival. "What will we name her?" Sofia asked. "Hope," he said immediately. "We will name her Hope. Because that is what you gave me. That is what you gave everyone who walks through that door." He reached out and touched the sonogram. "And because she will grow up knowing that sometimes the rain falls so hard you think it will never stop. But it always does. The rain always stops. And when it does, the sky clears." Sofia leaned against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart against her back, and thought of the woman she had been 1 year ago, counting $78, sleeping in a closet, eating garbage, invisible to the world. That woman had survived. That woman had become a beacon. That woman had loved the most dangerous man in Seattle, and in doing so, had transformed him into something good. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.